Borders are no longer stable checkpoints. They are shifting fault lines where policy, technology, and geopolitics converge. What once looked like routine travel is now a high-risk arena where a small error, a new regulation, or a quiet diplomatic rift can redefine who moves, who is blocked, and who pays the price. The collapse of predictable mobility is not speculative. It is already underway. Subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what you're re-seeing on the ground so you stay a step ahead. The global environment is entering a period of accelerated closure. Countries that once championed openness are recalibrating, often under the radar. Pandemic-era restrictions train both governments and citizens to accept sudden mobility freezes. That precedent is now weaponized through geopolitics, trade disputes, and reciprocal retaliation. Borders remain formally open, but the reliability of passage has quietly eroded. Economic strain fuels the contraction. States are using travel controls as economic levers, responding to tariffs, sanctions, or diplomatic clashes. Declining tourist flows, previously seen as seasonal fluctuations, now mirror strategic policy decisions. Travel advisories are no longer isolated bureaucratic updates. They signal deeper fractures in bilateral trust. Domestic politics intensify these shifts. Leaders invoke sovereignty and national security to justify barriers, but behind the rhetoric lies strategic calculation, restricting mobility projects, strength to domestic audiences while punishing rivals indirectly. Tourism, student exchanges, and business visits have become silent battlegrounds for influence. The perception of instability amplifies the effect. Even when no formal closure is declared, the risk of unpredictable treatment at borders deters travelers. Rumors of detentions or denied entry spread rapidly through media and digital communities, generating self-censorship in mobility. Governments leverage this fear without needing to enact sweeping bans. The outcome is fragmentation. Global mobility, once anchored by multilateral agreements and reciprocal trust, is now fractured into shifting blocks. Trusted corridors shrink, while once stable flows weaken. What is unfolding is less a sudden wall, more a gradual tightening, a squeeze that redefines who can move, when, and under what hidden conditions. Passports and visas, once reliable tools of identity, are losing predictability. Visa waivers and electronic travel authorizations are being recalibrated, often without public announcement. Programs once promoted as seamless are quietly suspended, revised, or restricted, catching travelers by surprise at the point of entry. The erosion of reciprocal agreements is central. Countries that historically allowed visa-free entry are now reimposing requirements, citing security concerns or political disputes. This is not random. It is targeted, aimed at nations whose policies generate friction. In practice, entire classes of travelers lose privileges overnight with little warning. Electronic travel authorizations, ETAs, designed to simplify mobility, are increasingly weaponized. What appears as a streamlined process often masks deeper surveillance integration. Denials occur more frequently, often without explanation, and appeal mechanisms are opaque. The illusion of digital efficiency conceals a system of silent exclusion. Visa revocations have also accelerated. Travelers with valid documents find permissions withdrawn mid-journey or denied at transit hubs. The growing reliance on dynamic watch lists makes every border crossing provisional. Holding a visa no longer guarantees entry. It is contingent on unseen variables updated in real time. The cumulative effect is erosion of trust in documentation itself. Passports and visas still function, but their authority is conditional, reversible, and fragile. In this new environment, paperwork is not a guarantee of movement, but a provisional access token, subject to revocation at any moment. Security architecture is reshaping mobility through technology. Artificial intelligence now powers border operations, scanning biometrics, analyzing digital histories, and building predictive traveler profiles. Decisions that once involved human officers are increasingly automated, creating new risks and reducing transparency. Profiling no longer stops at passports. Digital footprints, social media posts, purchase histories, and travel patterns feed into AI-driven risk assessments. The expansion of pre-crime logic means travelers are judged not only on identity, but on predictive behavior, including associations and opinions. The infrastructure of surveillance extends beyond airports. Data collected at borders feeds into wider intelligence networks, shared across alliances. Travelers may be flagged for secondary screening in one country due to an unrelated incident in another. Borders are nodes in a larger ecosystem of digital control. Errors within these systems carry disproportionate weight. An algorithmic misclassification can trigger detentions or deportations, with limited avenues for challenge. The opacity of AI-driven screening leaves travelers uncertain of what triggered adverse action, fueling distrust and chilling mobility. Governments defend this expansion as essential to counter threats. But the scope has widened far beyond terrorism or organized crime. Political dissent, trade tensions, and even cultural disputes are now embedded in the logic of automated border surveillance. The line between security and strategy has blurred. Perceptions of travelers are increasingly stratified by nationality. The treatment of citizens from specific countries reflects shifting alliances and power balances more than individual conduct. This reordering is reshaping travel flows and reputations globally. American travelers are a primary case. Once enjoying near universal ease of movement, they now face heightened scrutiny in multiple regions. Security checks, longer interviews, and secondary inspections are increasingly routine. Countries historically aligned with Washington now use border interactions to signal political distance. In contrast, travelers from smaller states sometimes experience smoother passage, benefiting from neutrality or less politicized profiles. Regional blocs such as ASEAN or the Gulf Cooperation Council increasingly coordinate to create preferential corridors that bypass traditional Western dominance. European travelers face growing divergence. In some regions, they still enjoy privilege. In others, they confront suspicion linked to colonial histories or current policies. The uniformity of the Western traveler no longer holds. Treatment varies, calibrated by local perceptions of alignment and respect. For citizens of the global South, border experiences remain complex but increasingly strategic. Their mobility is influenced by remittance flows, investment ties, or labor agreements. Nationality is no longer just a document. It is a proxy for geopolitical positioning, shaping every movement. The risks attached to travel are escalating. Detentions, deportations, and secondary screenings are no longer rare anomalies. They are operational tools. Governments deploy them to deter unwanted flows or to send signals of disapproval to rival states. Minor errors can now produce outsized consequences. A misspelled form, an overlooked document, or a past online statement may trigger denial of entry. Appeals are limited, and the immediate response often involves confinement, interrogation, or removal. The margin for error has collapsed. Deportations are increasingly carried out under harsh conditions. Reports of travelers restrained, denied consular access, or blacklisted from future entry are rising. These actions serve as warnings, reinforcing deterrence by example. Beyond the individual, consequences ripple into economies and communities. Business meetings collapse, academic collaborations stall, and tourism-dependent sectors suffer. Each denied traveler represents not only a personal disruption, but a signal of systemic instability. The cumulative effect is deterrence. Travelers, aware of heightened risk, self-select out of certain destinations. What governments cannot block directly, uncertainty achieves indirectly. Mobility shrinks not only through policy, but through fear of unpredictable enforcement. The trajectory suggests a tightening cycle. In the short term, more nations will recalibrate entry rules, targeting rivals while consolidating trusted corridors. Travel advisories will proliferate, quietly signaling fracture points in global relations. Medium-term surveillance integration will deepen. Expect wider adoption of AI-based systems, more real-time data sharing, and increasingly automated border operations. This will reduce transparency, creating environments where travelers face opaque judgments and limited recourse. Tourism flows will restructure accordingly. Traditional destinations, including the United States, may see declines as perceptions of hostility or risk spread. Alternative hubs, regional, politically neutral, or digitally advanced, will capture displaced demand. Diplomatic signaling through mobility controls will grow. Entry restrictions, selective detentions, and visa suspensions will function as tools of statecraft. Borders will be less about geography and more about strategic messaging. The long-term implication is fragmentation. The promise of seamless global mobility, sustained for decades, is dissolving. What emerges is a stratified system where movement is contingent, conditional, and politically loaded. Mobility will no longer be assumed, it will be negotiated. The collapse of predictable mobility is not sudden, but cumulative. Borders are tightening through layered restrictions, algorithmic surveillance, and geopolitical signaling. The old assumption that documents guarantee passage is obsolete. In this emerging environment, mobility is no longer a right or a privilege. It is a conditional allowance, shifting with politics and powered by data. The world is reorganizing its flows, and those who fail to adapt risk being left immobile. Stay informed, stay ahead. Subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what you are seeing on the ground so you stay a step ahead.